And its draft season is finally here, and I'm delighted to be joined for the third year in a row by Mr. Shane P. Hallum. The pick. So at number 3, you had Aquanu going. And what do you think of Icky, as he seems to have guarded that nickname?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. Not that he wasn't on my board, but I had him as a guard coming into the year. I didn't think he had the athleticism to be a tackle, and this season just really took off with his footwork, with that high-end athletic ability. I watched week 1 of NC State and said, this guy is really, really good, just mauling people and getting out there. I think what you can get with him is you have a player that can play right tackle immediately and step in, give you a good pass protection ability, but also is going to create some space in the run game. And I think he's one of those players that we always say, it seems like a cliche thing, but he would be an elite guard. Like, you put him inside, I mean, he could pull. There's so much you could do with him. So I think worst case scenario, if that doesn't work out, I think you have a player who's going to be an elite guard. I think it's a safe pick to me, and I think the Texans might swing for that double rather than that home run. I think Aquanu is going to start for a long time.
Yeah, I keep sort of kind of coming back to the notion that he, like you said exactly that, Shane, he might be a safe pick because for this year, most likely we've got Titus Howard at right tackle, who we messed around last year and disrupted his development, and obviously Tunsil will be back just because we've restructured his contracts. He's untradeable at that dead cap hit. But yeah, I think could you see certainly a scenario where you add to those two guys, and if Aquanu can kick in at right or left guard, then certainly that would be a question. Now, from the couple of games I watched, and I'm just going off memory here, Shay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but they played pretty much a zone running scheme, and I think Pep Hamilton's kind of desire certainly is to run sort of a more kind of gap orientated principles. Do you see the transition with that quite similar? Because I've had this debate with a lot of people, with Tyler Linderbaum as well, just saying I don't think he's applicable to the Texans because it's a zone based scheme in Iowa, and to take somebody that high that's not of those principles. I think Aquanu is perhaps an athlete that can play both, but how do you sort of view that when you're looking at fit for teams?
Yeah, I'm with you with Linderbaum. I don't think he'd be a fit in the power gap. I do think Aquanu can play that really well. I actually think he might be better in a gap scheme to me, because he kind of has you can tell that when he engages in the run game, he wants to kind of get that pop. He wants to be the aggressor. And the scheme at NC State didn't ask him to do that. There are even plays where I don't think he was kind of playing within the scheme. Like, if he knew what guy was coming at him, he would just try to take that guy down, which you're not supposed to do in the zone scheme per se, right? You're supposed to create that as a kind of zone and sit back and just keep him in that zone. So I actually think it would be a much better fit maybe than it appears, even if it's not something that he's super used to there at NC State this year.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he seems like a kind of checks all the boxes kind of prospect. So hopefully, I think a pick like that, as you said, a safe pick that we can start building cornerstones. Yeah, no, definitely. And I've seen in the recent days as linked to another Georgia teammate, Devonta Wyatt. But at 13, Shane, you had the defensive tackle Jordan Davis from that formidable front seven. What's your sort of kind of summation of him as a prospect? Because it's certainly quite high to take a defensive tackle.
It is, and the Texans are a tough team to mock for, because they could take anybody. Like, it could almost take anybody, and and be good. And so I was looking at the roster and felt like, okay, this Jordan Davis, his combine at 6'6", 341 pounds. If you take that size and position into account, it was the second best combine ever for a prospect, only to Calvin Johnson. So, like, here's a guy that's huge, is a really good athlete, and that was the question coming in. Like, is he a good athlete? They really played him on first and second down mostly, like you said, because they have a first round pick, probably top 10 pick, to fill in for him on third down next year. Will be a top 10 pick next year in Jalen Carter. Yep. So, for Jordan Davis, it was, I think, he can do it. And you even see on some of those first down passes, play action stuff. I mean, he has that get up to be a nose tackle that can play 3 downs, that can kick out the 5 tech, that can do a lot of different things. I just think he reminds me of Haloti Ngata of the Ravens a couple years back now, who, he could 2 gap, but he also could move that center out of his way. I just think it would create a front seven and really revitalize that Texans defense. I think Davis would be an intriguing prospect.
Yes, I had a concern with them just when I watched them against Alabama, watched both games, and just the way they set the protections against him at the front. They were quite happy to leave the guard or the centre one-on-one with him a lot of the time, and obviously it's pick your poison against that front seven. But I just thought, you talked about that earlier with Walker. It seemed like they were kind of okay to leave him one-on-one, and I suppose some of the knock is he's not quite there in terms of pass rush to take that high. What do you sort of think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the question. I think it's why he's not a top 10 pick. I think it's why you start looking 10 to 15, because there are games where the pass rush isn't there. I mean, there are, and sometimes I question the scheme at Georgia with him is, did they kind of ask him to maybe sit back a little more and just play the two gap and stop that run in the middle, even on passing downs? Like, he just didn't seem to have, kind of the get off when they asked him to. Then you go back to, a couple of the games where he had a sack, and you can see them letting him pin his ears back, and teams kind of move from that single to double. So I don't know. I think teams are going to talk to that Georgia coaching staff, see how they utilized him, see what, was there an issue here? Was there not? What was the reasoning? I think it's going to be an important part in his draft stock. I mean, if you told me he went at 8, or you told me he went at 31, I wouldn't overly surprise me. And that's what makes him tough to place.
Yeah. And going into the second round, we've got BREECE Hall coming out of Iowa, who is pretty much consensus the number one running back on for most evaluations. What do you make of him? Because certainly when I watched him, it looks very easy, and he glides across the turf. And there isn't many running backs who it almost looks like they're not. And I always think about Arian Foster. It never looked like he was running all that quickly. But he seemed to beat people to the end zone and what have you. So he kind of reminded me a little bit of him, not as much a bow-legged runner, but like Foster was. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching BREECE Hall. I think he's got potential at the next level.
I just think he can do everything that you want. I know some people are like, why are you taking a running back that early? But I mean, the cupboard's bare, and like you said, at 5'11", 217. I did not think he was like a 4-4 flat player. I thought, he'll run the 4.5s. But like you said, he's faster than it appears when you watch him because of the size, because of how he moves. Really good at using his lower body and then moving his upper body, kind of juke guys out. It's tough to really get a sense of where he's going to go. You really get a clean tackle on him, can catch the ball, can block. So I think once we saw the high-end athleticism numbers, I said, here's a productive running back who is a superior athlete and can do everything. I think it makes him really intriguing. I think you worry about, is he really a home run threat? Is he really a player that's going to be able to, take it 50 yards to the house? I don't know if that's the case. And sometimes the agility in short space isn't ideal. So that's why I think he can fall to the second round. But it wouldn't surprise me if he goes late first too. I think he is a 3-down, rock solid running back.
Yeah, we desperately need an injection of youth at that position, because it's been a long time since we've invested in that position. Obviously, the Donta Foreman never quite worked out. Made a bit of a comeback last year for Tennessee, but no, I think that would be welcomed. Now, this next one at the top of the third at 68. This is an interesting one when I saw this, and I was glad you actually had that there, because it's been something I've been looking at quite a lot recently. And when you watch that Oklahoma defense, again, a lot of talent on there, a lot of guys coming out this year. So, but Nick BONITTO, I take it you see him as an off the ball linebacker rather than on a four-man front.
Yeah, I think he would be an off-ball linebacker that you could just utilize in so many different ways. I think he's one of those linebackers who could suffer from what is he exactly, like where do we want to use him? And that's why I like that, I think the Texans are going to use on defense with some multiple fronts, because you can have him stand up and rush the passer. I think he's a guy that could drop back into coverage and be okay. But I have him as an edge player because he can really kick off, stand up, put the hand down. Oklahoma used him in a lot of different ways. They actually moved him around the formation a lot to get good matchups with the offensive line, which you don't see that often. So I was really intrigued by that. And I think he is underrated in terms of what he can bring to the table as a pass rusher and getting to the quarterback. Like so many different moves that he has in his repertoire. Not the biggest guy, but he's athletic and he can get to that edge and sneak around pretty quickly. I just think he's a really, really intriguing player who could even go a little higher than that, I think, if a team feels like he's a good fit.
Yeah, because I think there's definitely an argument to be made. He's probably one of the top, few athletes in the draft potentially, because I think the explosion, the burst that he goes by people in the rush, but then also just the range and athleticism. I think for BONITTO is I think different teams and different systems could use him multiple ways, but I've not seen enough of him dropping in pass coverage, so that's something I need to go and have a look at. But do you think it's all there to be a sort of kind of either a Sam or a Will?
Yeah, I do think it's there. I would kind of prefer him as a Will personally. That's where I would place him. But I've said that about plenty of guys that end up on the other side, and it depends on that scheme. But I think there's a skill set there to develop that Oklahoma, like I said, used him, usually rushing the passer in a lot of different ways. I think he has the athletic ability and size to be a good pass coverage linebacker, but if you put him at the will, then I think you can find ways to exploit the offense and really get to the quarterback. I hope he goes to a good situation that uses him correctly.
Yep. And the pick they got back from Bradley Roby from New Orleans at 80. Just making his way down the highway from Waco, JALEN PITRE from BAYLOR. What do you make of him? I've seen him kind of people talking about sort of early day two, and then I've seen a variance of opinions on him. But what do you like about PITRE?
He's just brutal, man. I mean, he is such a good safety in terms of running down in the box, running downhill, hitting guys, and he still hits them. Sometimes you have some of these safeties, you're like, they hit really hard, but they put their head down. I mean, he tackles with fundamentals, but still can punish you with what he does. And I think that's kind of rare. It's why he could go early day two, but I do think a safety class has a lot of good players at the top. And ultimately, when you get a guy that has 4.4 speed and is a good run defender, there's just so much you can do with him. He can play in a 2 deep zone. I think he's good at that. And I think he can now kind of scoot him down and help with the run game. I think he's a versatile safety that could help the Texans replace some of what they've lost this offseason at that position.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's it's certainly you want. So I think there's part of this as well, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, which I think it's easier to do early, is create an identity and create some attitude on defense. I think because that's the way to kind of sort of solidify a unit rather than what we've seen in the last couple of years. But another guy here, which I've seen again a bit of a variance of opinions of. I know at the Combine, certainly on NFL Network, Daniel Jeremiah was a huge fan of in the workout. Troy Anderson, what do you make of him, another linebacker? And Caserio, I'm sure Caserio would thank you for that, because he does have an affinity for signing multiple linebackers.
You got to figure that out. I think Anderson's really a steal at that point. I feel like he's going to go higher. He has such an intriguing story. Played quarterback for Montana State, played fullback, played running back. Kind of has a lot of experience in a lot of different positions because he is a really, really good athlete, but also strong fundamentally. You can see how he reads an offense. A lot of times it seems to know what the offense is going to do. From everything I've heard, very big into film study, loves having being the leader, calling the plays, calling the adjustments. He would be that guy that you can plug in on defense, and I think could play in terms of a middle linebacker. I think he'd be a really good Sam, ultimately on the strong side that you could utilize. So just a really versatile, athletic player, who knows what he's doing. I think that's, like you said, a way to build a defense and have an identity. I think Troy Anderson would really help with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in cornerback's a position we really need to address, in a big way. Often pro ready. Sometimes there's an argument the prospects out of Bama come out, almost too refined, and it's kind of they've found a ceiling already. But you've a guy who I wasn't actually familiar with is Josh JOBE, cornerback. Bama, what do you make of him?
So he's a player 2 years ago, was getting some first round publicity like some of these Alabama players do when you have against the second or third receiver and can do good things. I thought this year he took a step backwards, and that's why I have him falling a little further, where some might have him in day 2. I think this was a tough year for him. He's kind of, not a big press corner, but he has good athleticism. I like the way he turns and runs, very fluid hips, kind of can swing. Did well really manning up this year, but he struggled when he was facing kind of bigger receivers. That's kind of a problem. Can you coach him up to be able to handle that, or play him in more of a zone scheme? I think would be better. So I think it's kind of a little developmental pick for a player who, like you said, from Alabama, usually tailor-made, ready to go. But I think Josh Jobe is a player who might need a little bit of time just to kind of get his feet wet and learn the game a little bit more.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you again next week.